Joining me now is Toby Fricker, a spokesperson for UNICEF. Toby, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much.
What has your team on the ground been seeing? What is going on there?
Yeah, well, I mean, day in, day out, what they've been seeing is this sort of intensity of the hostilities. Yeah, we hope that by now things may have calmed down, but we're still seeing, incredibly intense hostilities. We're seeing, a horrific number of children injured, children killed on an everyday basis. We still have children, who have been abducted, being held as hostages, and we call for their immediate release as well. So UNICEF, we've spoken out, and so has the UN Secretary General and many others, to calling for this immediate humanitarian ceasefire, to essentially, first of all, save lives, to better protect children, but also then to be able to better respond and bring in more humanitarian supplies, life-saving supplies that can at least try and alleviate some of the suffering. This is an area, the Gaza Strip, a small geographic area with more than 1 million children. Half the population is children, and they're really going through a horrific time, obviously, right now.
You mentioned that number. Have any indication on how many children have been able to flee from the north? The Israeli army has been telling them to leave the north. Any idea how many children are still there, though?
Well, we're aware that around 1.4 million people have been displaced and moved to other areas. I don't have the exact figures on the number of children who are currently inside the northern part of Gaza Strip. But what we know is it's a very densely populated area. It's very hard for people to be moving around, even before the current hostilities. And then a lot of people in further south are living in very, very densely populated shelters to try and seek safety. But as we're seeing more and more, even those shelters are not safe. And the difficulty is now getting that access to safe water, to sanitation services. So we're trying to bring in supplies as quickly as we can, but it's still limited. And as the UN Secretary General said before, that the supplies are inadequate right now. We really need to do a lot more to get that life-saving support and move it around the Gaza Strip where we can, in very dangerous situation right now.
And what supplies are needed and how much? They've talked about maybe a few dozen trucks getting through at a time, but literally, is it hundreds of trucks that are needed?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, hundreds of trucks are needed. Even before this current hostilities, you needed hundreds of trucks to bring in support, to bolster, medical supplies, for example. So UNICEF has been able to bring in some medical supplies. We've been able to bring in some water purification, some hygiene kits, and we're at real risk, of other issues breaking out, so disease breaking out. So when you see people living in such densely populated areas, we need to be able to provide that, improve the sanitation, improve the access to safe water. But then you have issues with fuel. So UNICEF has a desalination plant we've been supporting in the Gaza Strip for a number of years, which is very low on fuel, which is very important to keep running, to at least provide some water to the population. Staff have spoken about this salty water that they've had to drink, that their children have had to drink, and they're getting sick, they're getting diarrhea, they're feeling dehydrated. So these are massive issues on top of trying to stay safe, trying to stay alive.
Is there a big concern now for disease, things like cholera with the unclean water?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the water sources in the Gaza Strip, even before this hostilities now, were very compromised, let's say. And there were around about 800,000 households who were already drinking regularly contaminated water, groundwater that they pull up through wells, which is often contaminated, needs to be treated properly so that people can drink it, particularly children. When they're drinking unsafe water, it leads to all sorts of complications. And as I said, the concern now is that children are, first of all, struggling to access enough water. We're looking at around 3 liters per person per day, when usually in an emergency, like this or other emergencies, we try to reach a 15-liter per day level, and we're way below that. The actual overall capacity of the water system is providing 5% of what it did before the current hostility. So that's obviously a massive concern.
What would it take for a humanitarian pause that many people are calling for?
Well, we keep calling, and we really keep trying to push that line. UNICEF's role is to advocate, on behalf of child rights, to better protect children in conflict. And UNICEF, we're one player. We work obviously with the UN system, the UN Secretary General, many others, and we keep calling for that immediate humanitarian ceasefire, because it's absolutely critical now to save children's lives, to also enable the immediate release of hostages, particularly children who should be at home being nurtured and cared for. But it's absolutely critical that we get that humanitarian ceasefire as soon as possible.
All right, Toby Fricker, spokesperson for UNICEF, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.